What's up, my brothers and sisters? Welcome to the Fireground Fitness Podcast, where we talk about all things pertaining to life on and off the fireground. The views and the opinions expressed are those of your host and our guest. Today, we sit down with Fire Chief Carlos Aviles. He shares with us some of his time in the Army, talks to us a little bit about PTSD and some of the issues that he experienced and how he drove through those things and now is finding himself as a fire chief and the things that he is doing in that position to take care of the men and women in his organization and the state of Florida. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy. Chief Carlos Aviles, thank you so much for sitting down and rapping with us this morning. I want to get in and talk about your journey in the fire service, and I really want to talk about some of the stuff that you're doing with the state firefighters and the outreach you did to the younger group of firefighters. I think that's a very cool topic, and I want to touch on that. But I also want to talk about your time in the Army and how that has shaped who you are as a fire chief and some of that stuff. So I've got so many things I want to talk about. I don't really know where exactly we should begin. So maybe we start with, we'll start from the beginning. Where's the beginning for you? Where's the beginning for you?
The beginning for me, oh boy, I don't even know how far back I should go. Right now I'm the fire chief for the city of St. Augustine. Best job I've ever had in my life. It's awesome. But my journey started really back in 2003. Or 2001, I joined the military in my senior year of high school, graduated, did delayed entry, wanted to stay close to home. So I did the reserves, was going to go to school. And then 2000, shortly after 9/11 happened, and it became very apparent to me that I was going to end up seeing different parts of the world. And so that really started my journey.
So
I went to Iraq.
Reserve turned into full-time pretty quickly?
I mean, sort of, yes. Yep, that's about the best way to look at it. So I went to basic training, AIT, as a military police officer. That was my preferred MOS. A lot of regrets about that, but everything in life,
hold on. We gotta unpack that.
Method.
We gotta unpack that, Chief. So a little. Are you regretting that you went in the Army and not the Marine Corps?
Yes. So I will tell you, right, truth be told, I actually did 4 years of ROTC in high school with a Marine Corps ROTC unit.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And loved it. I mean, I know more about Marine Corps history than I know about Army history. But I love the Marine Corps' culture. At the time, I just felt like there would be more opportunity for me in the Army. In hindsight, I should have just joined the Marine Corps. Probably would have been a much better experience for me. But I have tons of respect for the Marine Corps. I more regret the whole military police route.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I thought I wanted to do law enforcement. That was always that's what I thought I wanted to do. Got out of high school, got into college to do criminal justice, and that was always my track. So then 2003 rolls around, we end up getting ready to mobilize to go into Iraq. So we were part of that initial invasion team into Iraq. And we did, I think, 16 months on that first deployment. And lo and behold, the people that I seemed to clash with the most on that deployment were all guys that were cops on the outside. And so that deployment was a great defining moment for me, because I knew when I came home, law enforcement is not the field for me.
Interesting.
But I had a bit of a rough homecoming. We lost a friend of ours at the end of that deployment. And I came home and I spiraled, in the worst way imaginable, one of the lowest moments of my life. And I had a friend of mine that he called me one day, was on the deployment with me, and tells me that he's going to go to fire school. And, at the time I was sitting there thinking, well, if you could do it, I could do it. And he was going to do it in St. Augustine. I was living in Orlando at the time. It's about 2 hours away. And I packed my stuff up, came up here, checked out the academy, looked at everything, and I instantly thought to myself, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I love it. This is great. And I drove back home to Orlando. I was working for my dad at the time. And I sat down with him. I said, "Hey, I'm moving and I'm going to go to fire school." And he just kind of broke down and started crying.
Really?
And was so grateful that I had found something to be excited about, that there was that spark in me. It gave me a sense of purpose, that sense of camaraderie. I felt like I was serving others, which is something I've always been really driven to do. And I needed the fire service to help get me out of the hole that I was in.
Yeah.
So
what were you doing for What were you doing for your dad?
I was turning wrenches. He owned like a car dealership and a mechanic shop, so I was just doing a bunch of work for him.
Yeah, but you were still
I was a terrible employee. I mean, I would have fired me. I don't know why he put up with me for so long.
He felt obligated.
I did, kiddo. And so I didn't grapple with the loss well.
Yeah.
And to be in a combat zone and then dropped back into the civilian world and expected to just pick up the pieces like nothing ever happened was really difficult for me. So I mean, I struggled with a lot of PTSD, anxiety, massive amounts of anger issues, and was just adrift, like completely rudderless. I mean, I don't even know. I was just horrible. And I felt like I needed to be completely engrossed in something and felt like I had a purpose or a mission. Because prior to that, I was like, man, I should just go back. So that's all I kept thinking. Like, I should just volunteer and go back, and I could make a living out of being deployed overseas.
Right. So how old were you at that point?
Oh, I mean, I was 18 when I was over there. I turned 19 in Iraq, almost turned 20 while I was over there. We were gone for so long. So I think I signed up for EMT school when I was 19 or 20. And so I did EMT school first, then went through the fire academy. Then I had to start looking for work. And I was very, very fortunate. So I'm at the tail end of the fire academy. There's a couple of weeks left. The city of St. Augustine offers, they state that they're hiring, and that back then it was in the newspaper. Like, I don't feel old. I'm not. I'm 39, but like to see an advertisement in the newspaper now feels
that's old school.
Ago.
You can admit it. You're old. School, you are old.
Like, how did you hear about the job opening in the newspaper? That feels weird even saying it now.
So,
but the application said you didn't have to be certified.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not certified, but I'm close.
So
let me go see what this test is like.
Is your guys' academy like a state-run academy or something like that?
So that's a great question, because that's going to feed into some of the recruitment and retention stuff later. So in Florida, you got to put yourself through school, where in other parts of the country, maybe a department hires you, takes a shot on you, and they put you through their own academy.
Right.
In Florida, it's a little bit different. You've got to put yourself through fire and EMT school, become credentialed by the state, and then you go out and seek employment.
Oh, wow.
All right. So it's a little bit of a different system than most. So I show up for this test for the city of St. Augustine. There's probably 80 to 100 people in this testing room. And the HR director is talking about, we just had 7 people up and leave to go to another department. We're a whole shift short. We know the advertisement says that you don't have to be certified, but we're really looking for people who are certified. We expect to extend some job offers here today.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a civil service and a physical exam. So we do it. There's 2 other guys that are in the standards class with me. And so we do the test. I feel like it went really well. I go out, I do the physical test, and I run into the chief as I'm wrapping up the physical test. And he just looks at me and he goes, "Hey, what's your name?" And I tell him, and he says, "Are you certified?" I said, "No, sir, I'm not, but I'm in school. I've only got like 3 weeks to go or something like that." And he goes, "Okay, well, we need people that can start like right now." I said, "No, I understand." So I don't think anything of it. About a week goes by, and I get a call from the department, and they're like, "Hey, so
you done yet?"
Yeah, you done yet? You got all your stuff? And I'm, no, not yet, but I'm really close. They're like, okay, well, we filled some of the positions, but we've heard a lot of good things about you. They preach all the time that every day is a job interview at the academy. And there were a couple of guys that were instructors out there that worked at the school that are seeing us on a daily basis.
Right.
And, I said, all right. So they invite me in for an interview. So I come in, I do the interview. I feel like it goes really well. I don't hear anything for a while. I get a phone call later, a week or two later. Hey, do you have all your stuff yet? I'm like, I don't. But my test is like on Friday. It was like the week of our final exam, and I had everything else. And so, the chief at the time was like, look, we like you. There's a couple other people in your class that are kind of in the same boat. Pass your test and you got a job.
Wow.
And
No
I'm
pressure
like, oh
though.
my God, no pressure. I cram so hard, nonstop. And complete honesty, like I finished that test and remember thinking to myself, I don't know if I passed. I have no idea if I passed.
Right.
And then like days go by. At this point, I haven't been working in 8 months. I've been in school full time. So I go back to Orlando. I'm turning wrenches for my dad. It's been 3 weeks. I haven't heard anything. Chief's getting upset. He's calling, asking me if I've gotten my letter yet. I'm like, no, I don't have anything yet, sir. And so I'll never forget it.
Does it go through
It was
like the state fire commission or something like that, or?
yes, yeah, the Bureau of Fire Standards and Training.
Okay.
And so it's May. I'm in Orlando. I'm in a dirt field dropping a transmission for my dad, laying in the dirt, completely covered in grease. I've got mud on my back because I'm sweating through my shirt. And the phone rings, and I see, the 904 area code. I'm like, oh man. So I pick it up, and it's Chief Owens, and he just goes, hey, I got sick and tired of waiting. I called the State Fire College. They didn't tell me what you got. They just said that you passed and you're credentialed. So can you be here tomorrow morning at 7? I was like, I will be there at 6.
That's
and
awesome.
I left everything. I was like, sorry, Dad, gotta go. Threw everything I owned in a duffel bag, cleaned myself up, and took off. Never did finish dropping that transmission. And I have never looked back. I mean, I have enjoyed every single day of work since then.
No, that's awesome. What a fascinating story. To me, that is so different than how I've ever experienced it out here in my neck of the woods, and such a different model.
It is. It's very different. I mean, and that's, back then it's hard. It was hard to get hired on somewhere, and that was never lost on me. Like one of my motivators is really never wanting to let people down. Like, it's one of my biggest fears. And I remember, like, you took a shot on me. Like, I will reward that with, doing the best job that I can.
Yeah.
In this environment.
Well,
and I feel the same way about other people that have given me that opportunity before.
No, that's important, right? Is you think about the relationships and the reputation and those folks who were watching you while you were in the academy and sending the information back. Like, your reputation begins. I think people seem to forget how small the system is that we all work in, right? Your reputation precedes you because people are watching and paying attention and to every move you make.
The fire service is so small.
Yeah.
You will make connections throughout your career. Jokingly, I was helping at another agency with their search for a fire chief, and I'm working with non-fire service people in this search. And I told them, I said, listen, you're going to learn a lot about the fire service in this process. Like, that's what I'm here to help you with. I go, but information control is going to be paramount. I said, the 3 fastest forms of communication known to man are telephone, telegraph, and telefireman. I said, so just be prepared, because everything that gets brought up in this meeting is likely to spread like wildfire. But yes, the fire service is small, and we do know of people everywhere.
Right. Well, and I love the fact that, that those folks who were at the training academy leveraged their position to tell their boss, hey, we've got some great candidates coming down the pipeline. And that put you on their radar, right on the Chief's radar. Yep. It's just a neat, and then they took a chance on you and brought you on board, and it's wonderful.
It's a practice that I utilize today. We have quite a few guys that teach out at the academy, and they harp on that. They tell everybody, I wouldn't dare want to bring somebody into the organization without vetting them through them. They're going to see them day in, day out,
Right.
long days for 3 or 4 months
Yeah.
straight. Like I want their input. What type of person were they in school?
Right. So,
So
so with that, so our model out here on the West Coast and in lots of other places is you go through an interview process, you go through your physical abilities test, etc., and then we offer you a job, put you through the tower, through the training academy, whatever you want to call it,
mhm.
and then we figure out what you really got going on. Do you feel
Right.
like that the model you guys have is preferable to that?
So I think it depends on the agency. I think, one of the things that we have really talked about at length this year at a statewide level is that the model that Florida follows in reality has become an encumbrance or a barrier
Mm-hmm.
to allowing people to enter the fire service.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are departments within the state that have begun sponsoring people, so they're following your model.
I see.
Um, for me as a personal note, I would be fine following that model. I think it would actually be better for us because our hiring practices are very different. And when we sit there and talk to our folks, it's a very clear understanding that our singular most important thing that we're looking for in the hiring process is character.
Right.
Right? That as an organization, we trust the internal system to develop these people into phenomenal firefighters, that we can't make them better people, that they need to come through our doors with that skill set, and that we can build off of that, and we can really mold them into the firefighters that we want. We can
Yeah.
mold them into better people.
One of the
And
things,
so I'd be fine with
yeah,
switching the models up in that regard.
yeah. Well, the thing that occurs to me that I, as I'm thinking through this, that I struggle with, for me, the struggle is in the fact that in a 20, 30-minute interview, trying to suss out the true quality of someone's character, through the stories they tell, through the questions, are we asking the right questions,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Like, I feel like that's, so many times the candidates come in very well coached, and they've been, they've got family, friends, etc., who are on the job, who have told them how to, I don't want to say game, but how to work their way through the process successfully.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do we truly understand are we getting people who reflect the organizational values, or are we getting people who reflect the values of those who've been coaching them?
Yeah, I I think that that's a fair question to ask. I can tell you, I'm not dissatisfied with our hiring process.
Yeah.
Um, so I've had the privilege of serving as chief now for almost 7 years, and so I'm at the point now where like 53 or 54% of the organization has been hired under these new hiring practices,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just through attrition and folks leaving the fire service. And I'll tell you what I don't have. I don't have an issue with people abusing sick time. I
Mm-hmm.
don't worry about what my firefighters are doing outside of work. I don't worry about what they're doing while they're on duty. I can leave them unsupervised. I have no qualms about that. Like I trust them. They have earned that. And the amount of positive feedback I get from citizens or other people within the city when they interact with our firefighters is fantastic. I'm not reinventing the wheel
Right.
by any stretch of the imagination. Like I think Bruno really paved the way and kind of set that standard for the fire service. I just think that we have deviated far away from that, and that the mission has grown so much that we've allowed ourselves to drift away from that core principle of providing public service.
Right. Mm. Well, hey, we got into deep waters real fast, but I want to go back. 'Cause I knew that was going to happen with you and me. Hey, I want to go back though. So you just talked about being the fire chief for the last 7 years, but we need to connect those dots from when you started, and to becoming the fire chief. Did you have any deployments between then
I
and then and
did.
now?
Yep, 2014.
So
Um,
take us through the arc. So you came in, you got hired on. Um,
yep. So came in, got hired on, got really aggressive in taking classes and educating myself, wanting to learn more about the fire service. 2 years on, I was given the opportunity to promote to engineer, which, at the time was a very different structure, where you would think of an engineer as uh, a chauffeur or a driver operator. At that time, it was just an additional promotable position. And so as an engineer, I ended up essentially being a company officer at my own station,
Oh, wow.
with two people. But I had 2 years on the job, very unpopular. I was terrible at my job. I sucked, by my own admission.
Just not a
So
good
I mean, I was
driver.
very young. Yeah,
Which,
I wish
which,
I was driving.
well,
I
let me
think
ask
I
you,
think I would have been a lot better at that.
yeah, which part of that role was tough for you? Because it sounds
Just
like you were
the
thrust into
soft skill.
more of a lieutenant
It,
role than,
it was, yeah. For me, for practical purposes, it was like a company officer role or a
yeah.
lieutenant role, and that's just because of the wonky rank structure back then. But yeah, I was really really bad at it. Um, so I was very young, and I really wanted to prove myself. I had a lot of people saying I shouldn't have been promoted, that I was promoted too early, and I let those outside voices influence how I directed folks. And I didn't have any formal leadership training. So I resorted to the only leadership style I was familiar with or had seen, and that was very, authoritarian, right? Like the
You went Army
military.
model.
I went Army, right? Like,
Yeah.
you will do this. And I failed miserably, but I felt like so many eyes were on me and waiting on me to fail and waiting on me to screw up that I was leading out of fear more than I was leading out of my own confidence or abilities.
Mm.
And so we had, it's so stupid now. I like to think back on it. But so we had an incident it was Christmas Eve, and there was a local amphitheater that used to run like a winter wonderland. And they had a stage that they would convert into an ice skating rink in Florida, right? Like, this is the silliest thing I've ever heard
Can
of in my
anybody in
life.
Florida even ice skate?
I can, but that's because I used to rollerblade. But yeah, there's all the transplants.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's tons of people in Florida that can. So we get a call. We show up. It's a cardiac arrest on the ice. And we get there, and the crews are, doing exactly what they think they're supposed to be doing. They're very much dialed in. And one of the guys goes and hooks the AED pads up, and I'm like staring at the fact that we're all in a slosh of water.
Mm.
And I look at my driver. I'm like, "Hey, Cody, let's lift him up and get him off the ice, like just like that." And he kind of stopped and looked around, and he goes, "Hey, good call." And so we got him off the ice, and I remember that vividly because, like, it was like one of those first set of circumstances where I'm like, okay. And they both looked at me like, oh, he does kind of know what he's doing. Like, we would have gotten ourselves in trouble. That's supposed to, like, that's what he's there to do.
Right.
And so slowly but surely, I, I, I learned really quickly that it was more about influencing others to get them to do what I need to do, as opposed to telling them that that's what I need them to do. And so, like, now when I tell the story and I'm talking to young company officers, I tell them, I go, you got to develop this chameleon style of leadership, right? You've got to learn what makes people tick, and you've got to learn to craft messages and around what they're into, what do they value, like what's important to them, right?
Right.
If you know what makes them tick and what motivates them, what values they have, then you can influence them to get them to do what needs to be done. Um, so yeah, felt really confident towards the tail end of that. I did that for about 3 years. Then another promotional opportunity came around. I was promoted to lieutenant. Um, Moved out of the downtown station, got to mentor underneath the captain. That was the first time I felt like I was really growing, because I had more one-on-one mentorship.
Right.
And but everything that I went through the first time in terms of like perception, what people thought of me, I had to relive all of that all over again.
Mm.
I was like, no confidence in me. I got promoted too early. I wasn't ready for this position. The chief at the time liked me, and that's why I got promoted. So I had to do a lot of that all over again. So I do that for about 3 more years. Then I become a captain. And at that time, when I made captain, it was the first time that I felt like I didn't have to reprove myself all over again.
Right.
That there was a little bit of, there was enough of it. Not that there weren't naysayers or doubters, but it wasn't as profound as the first time. So I was a captain for about 2 years. And then in 2014, I find out that I'm getting deployed and going back to Afghanistan. And so that kind of rocked my world, to say the least. I was already going through a fairly dark time in my life. I had kind of regressed on some mental health issues. My marriage wasn't as strong as I wish it would have been. And I did a lot of things where I had a lot of things I regret doing in that time frame. And I was really being driven and motivated by guilt. So, and I'll explain, I guess, a little bit.
Do you feel like a lot of this was like when you were young and you had that first initial exposure, that did you ever get any real intervention or therapeutic help at that time?
No.
So a lot of this, I'm sure. So I'm saying from my own experience, you probably were carrying a lot of this with you, right?
Yes. Right. So for over a decade, I lived under the principle of avoid and override.
Yeah.
So when the deployment came up in 2014, I was running from my personal life and really being driven by guilt. So the friend that I lost, and Arthur was his name, lost him in 2004, and he was with the 351st MP Company in Ocala, Florida. Well, this is the unit that I was in.
Okay.
We were the same rank. And there was a really big part of me that felt compelled to go on that mission and finish it for him. And I should never have been allowed on that deployment. But I was running from my personal life, running from my marriage.
Yeah.
My wife was pregnant with our third kid at the time.
Yeah.
And,
and just so people
nothing
know,
that I'm describing now sounds like fire chief material.
Well, let me just say this though, there's nothing stressful about having the third child. Like, come on, like,
yeah,
like, come on, like, there's a lot.
Man.
I just want to highlight the fact that life goes on, and we take on ever more. You're a captain at this point. You've got a third child on the way. That adds a lot of pressure, and I'm making light, by making a joke about that, but it's real. And sometimes we have a tendency to forget the amount of pressure that we take on as we grow up,
right, and
grow into life. So yeah, and so you talk about fire chief material, but I'm gonna let that sit for a minute because we'll come back to that. But
yeah, so it was a mess. That deployment was awful, really stressful. Had a really significant event towards the tail end of it where we had a mass casualty incident. And I really started to lose it towards the tail end of that trip.
Yeah.
And came home in absolute shambles. I immediately came back to work upon returning because I didn't know what else to do. Shouldn't have been allowed back to work. I wasn't living at home at the time with my wife or kids. I didn't feel like I was the type of person that should be around kids at the moment. And the only place I felt safe was at work, because I felt like I had a safety net of folks around me. But I remember, going to a medical call in the middle of the night and freezing up and saying, I'm going to stay right here. Like, I'm not getting out of the truck. And the guys would just cover for me.
Right.
Like they really would. And and I talk a lot about that now, and I share that experience to talk about, the culture of enabling, and that sometimes in the fire service, the brotherhood and camaraderie could really, the fine line between covering for somebody and enabling them at times can be razor thin. That I think I really was acting out with the hopes that somebody would intervene. It was more a cry for help.
Yeah.
My wife, to her credit, never really gave up on me. And I hit the lowest of lows, and we meet up somewhere and start talking, and she's just like, you're just not you. Like, I look at you and I don't know who you are. And I just remember, crying and breaking down in front of her and telling her, like, I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
And, but I'm broken. Like, I feel broken. I don't know how else to put that.
Yeah.
And she said something to me that will forever and ever and ever stick out in my mind. And it's that a broken crayon can still color. And I felt like, like the simplest of things, but it hit me in a way that I really needed at the moment. So the following week, I go to the VA. I start getting a ton of help. I think at its peak, I was going to a group VA counseling session once a week. I was doing individual counseling once or twice a week, and we started going to marriage counseling once or twice a week. Like, if I wasn't at work, I was guaranteed to have multiple appointments with somebody.
Yeah.
And really felt like I started to put the pieces back together. And having been through that and having experienced that really, I think, has given me a very clean perspective from a leadership perspective of how many things I wish I had done different, and that maybe I was meant to go through it to better sympathize with the firefighters that are struggling with this.
Yeah.
But to grow personally and professionally too. So then I get the worst news ever, and my fire chief calls and tells me that he's retiring. And
this is the chief. This is the chief that hired you on.
No, this is a different chief now.
Oh, okay.
I'm like heartbroken because I had always dreamed of being in that position. I was really hoping for some more time. But you take the opportunities when they come up, and I sat down, went through the process, and I was selected to be the fire chief. But all of those negative experiences that I felt the first couple of times I got promoted all came back. And there was a faction of the organization that did not want me because, by my own admission, I was horrible. Like the 2 years before that, I was a terrible person. But it wasn't me, I guess, is the big thing. But I mean, I had one firefighter come up to me the night that we're doing a farewell dinner for the outgoing chief. And he's like, hey, can I talk to you real quick? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. Like, we're outside the venue where this is happening.
Right.
And he just looked at me and he's like, I don't want you to be the fire chief. Like, I don't think you're worthy of that.
Worthy.
And I just looked at him and I just said, hey man, like, you're right. Like, you're completely justified in feeling the way that you do. I go, but I feel like I can do this. And all I'm asking for is an opportunity to be the chief that you guys deserve.
Right.
It's like, if I can win my family back, if I can win my wife back, if I can get my life back together, I can win you guys back. I know that I can.
Yeah.
All I need is an opportunity. If 6 months from now you feel the same way that you do, then do a vote of no confidence and get me out. But all I'm asking for is the opportunity. And I told myself that night that I will continue to come here and to be the chief that they deserve. So it is not a conventional route to becoming a fire chief.
Yeah.
I will tell you that.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like, you came off the heels of a pretty rough period, but a healing period. And, I would never wish anyone to go through that type of trauma to grow. But, there's an interesting dynamic in that growth cycle, right? And the maturity that comes with that trial, and the humility that it takes to go and sit in front of a therapist and say, and bear it all and expose yourself. there's a tremendous amount of growth that can come from that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've done most of my growth in this seat, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so let me ask you a
you know,
question real quick. So he said, I don't think you're worthy. What do you think he meant by that word worthy?
I mean, deserving, right? That I
Okay.
wasn't living, I think the position really comes with a tremendous amount of credibility in and by itself,
Right.
right? That there's a tremendous presence that comes with that title.
Mm.
Um, and then I think you just instantly associate that with a caliber of person that would lead others, right? I don't think I was in a position where I hadn't led myself for a good portion of that time. Now, granted, where I was during that moment or that conversation was so far from where I was,
Right.
at the lowest point of it,
Right.
that, I mean, I felt like trending in the right direction, but I own every bad thing I've ever said or done to anybody.
Yeah.
Um, but that my driving force was never about me, that it was about them, that it was the organization. And I'm such a massive proponent of stewardship. And I've only learned to appreciate that more now than ever before. But the same way that I didn't want to let that first fire chief down when he took a chance on me, I will never let this city or its firefighters down for taking a chance on me and for rallying around me
Yeah.
when when the time came.
Yeah. You said that you would, give me the opportunity to earn your trust. And so what are some of the things that you did, some of the big things that you deliberately did to go out there and, earn the trust
I
and
felt like I had to prove myself all over again.
yeah.
Um, I always felt like this department's amazing. I have forever seen so much talent within the organization. I just didn't feel like it was being utilized to its fullest potential.
Mm.
Um, but so it did not take long for me to be put to the test, honestly.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
So I was, I don't know, 6 weeks on the job, 3, 4, something like that. It was in my first month when Hurricane Matthew hit St. Augustine, and we were really the epicenter of that. We hadn't experienced a storm like that in decades. There wasn't any institutional knowledge, within the hierarchy. And so the way that it works here for our city is I also double as the emergency management coordinator. And
Lucky.
so I'm a month into this, trying to cut my teeth into this job.
Yeah.
And so the rank structure for the city changes, where the city manager remains at the top, sort of as the chief executive officer.
Mm-hmm.
And then I elevate to the number 2 position as the chief operating officer. And so I've got public works and all of the other departments now answering to me as an operations person, saying, this is how we're running this incident. This is what we're going to do. These are our plans. And the department hadn't been through an event like that not in my time at all there. So there was no internal institutional knowledge or experience to build off of. But a lot of my previous experience, and I treated it like a mission, right? Like the same way, that we would do troop leading procedures in the military. Like,
Right.
okay, start outlining objectives. These are things that we need to do. This is what I want you to focus on. These are the plans that we're going to put into effect. And it gave me an opportunity to really be that person in front of all of them in a moment of crisis, where if I wasn't going to be good at the job, I wouldn't have been. And my tenure as chief would have been over 6 weeks into it.
Right.
And the outcome of that, by very little of what I had to do with, but the way that they conducted themselves and the way that we pulled together as an organization, like, it was amazing. There were so many people afterwards that were like, man, you crushed it. Like, nobody had ever been through anything like this. And if you were going to fail, like, it would have been then. And it was that culminating event that I needed for the rest of the organization to say, hey,
get on board.
Okay, yeah, he can do it.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think the first year for any chief is an absolute blur. And mine was, because we got hit with a second hurricane 11 months later. And so like we were federally declared as a disaster area 11 months apart, all within my first year as chief.
Wow.
And so if I was going to fail, it would have been in that year, and the exact opposite happened. I gained the community's trust. The organization grew in terms of its credibility within the organization for how they conducted themselves during those events, and within other departments in the city, where they're like, man, the fire department has done more in this past year than we've seen or heard from them in a while. And I don't want anyone to have to go through that in order to earn that, but that's where we were. And
right. Well, you're able to prove your mettle.
Yeah. And that's okay. And I'm grateful for having had that opportunity now. And we've flooded so many times since then with storms that have come by. They all think it's my fault, and they might be right. I might be the black cloud on that one. But it's to the point now where if we had one coming today and I were out of the country for whatever reason, I wouldn't lose an ounce of sleep. Like, they're so well trained, proficient now. They know the game plans. We've refined them over time, that they would absolutely crush it with little to no direction.
Right. What an amazing entry into the world of being a fire chief. And
it was great. In hindsight, I'm telling, it was the best thing that ever could have happened to me.
Yeah.
I needed it. I needed it to gain confidence in myself, to know that I could do it. And I tried really, really hard during those first two storms to set the tone that I was there to take care of them.
Right.
That was my primary focus. Right. So like, as soon as the storm starts to calm down, I'm like, hey, if you need to go home to check on your homes, like, I want you to be able to go do that, and then just come back to work and we'll keep working. Make sure your families are okay. We did conference calls with families in case that they had questions. And it was a vastly different experience, right? Where I really wanted to try to tell them, like, look, please look out for your people, take care of them, do rest work cycles, because they're so amped up and
right.
wound tight that they're ready to just hit the ground running and go do work. It's like, nope, you need to remove yourself from the stressful situation from time to time. And I have evolved over the years to be hyper focused on taking care of them for their own well-being. Because I think we do get sucked into the mission at times.
Yeah. Well, I had a fire chief tell me that the two things he asked himself, this is Terry Garrison, he said the two things that he asked himself when making a decision is, how will this affect my firefighters, and how will it affect Mrs. Smith? If it's not I think he said, is it good? Is it good for my firefighters, and is it good for Mrs. Smith? And if the question is no to either one of those, we're not doing it.
Yep.
And if the question is yes, or positive, it's a positive thing, it's going to be good for our firefighters and good for Mrs. Smith, then let's look at it. And I think that's a fundamental kind of a baseline to approaching all these problems, right? If you can't take care of your firefighters, they can't handle the mission.
Yeah, that's it, right? Like, at its simplest, at our core, as fire chiefs,
right?
If we take care of them, it is going to free them up to take care of their citizens. And taking care of them means a lot of things.
Right. What does that mean to you when you think about that kind of broadly?
So I would tell you, like, my leadership perspective has changed immensely over the years, and that I consider myself more of a shepherd now than anything else. Right? That my objective with you, the day that you get hired, is for you to live to your fullest potential, do what you want to do, and be happy doing it. If you don't feel like this organization is going to provide you what you're truly capable of doing, then you should go seek that opportunity out, and I will help you. I want you to achieve what you want to achieve in life. I want you to be financially secure at the end of it. right? So we should be involved in labor negotiations because we want them to have a livelihood. You'll do it for the love of the job, but it's nice when you can do it for the love of the job and, feel secure in doing it, hopefully to the point where you're not having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to maintain it, right? I want you to be happy. Like, just live free, live happy, live long, be healthy. At the tail end of your career, you should leave here feeling like you made a difference, grateful for the opportunities that you had, financially secure and fulfilled in what you wanted to do.
Mm.
Right. And our job as leaders is to get you from point A to point B. And I pray that at point B, like at your finish line, that you're every bit as in love with the job today as you were when you started. I tell people all the time, like my tagline on social media is never stop loving it. Don't ever stop loving it. That all throughout your career, you will find people that will take joy out of extinguishing the flame within you that makes you love what it is that you do.
Mm.
Right? Don't ever allow yourself to be sucked into that group of people. Always find ways to reignite that flame, to keep that passion alive. If you do that, 25 or 30 years in this job will fly by in a heartbeat, and you will leave happy, healthy, and fulfilled. If you don't, it's going to feel like a prison sentence to you.
Yeah.
You're going to hate coming to work, and I don't want anybody to hate coming to work or not really love what they do. I love it more now as the chief than I ever did riding backwards.
Is that right?
It's an
How come?
entirely different level of perspective and appreciation because I'm zoomed out.
Mm.
So like when you're on an engine company, you're riding backwards or you're in some other seat within that company, you take a tremendous amount of pride in what you do individually or what your truck does individually. Mm-hmm. Now I love I will tell you, so moving to shift work, or moving out of shift work onto a regular, schedule allows you the opportunity to really appreciate the fact that there is so much talent within your organization that you don't see because you're siloed in your shift work.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that you probably formed an opinion of somebody else that you've never worked with because of something that somebody else told you, never because you've seen their entire body of work. So now it's a different level of appreciation. Watching the organization grow, watching people grow is the most rewarding thing ever. Watching somebody, exceed what your expectations of them were, or just really knock your socks off. Watching this well-oiled machine operate on a fire ground where these guys show up, jump off of trucks, and know instinctively what to do. Like, these guys could fight a fire without a chief out front. They know what needs to be done. They're very proficient at what they do. And it's a really, so from an administrator's perspective, right? When your training program, your budget, and your your core values all should complement each other. And when you do that and everything works in harmony, right? It's a different cog on the wheel. All right, what's our culture? Our culture is we want to be an aggressive, well-trained fire department. Awesome. I mean, so that's our culture. That's the machine that we're going to feed. Well, then administratively, I want to make sure that the policies align with that objective. And then budgetarily, I want to do what I need to do to help support that as well, right? So then all of a sudden your policies, your culture, your training program, and your budget are all working towards the same goal to produce these amazing firefighters that have the equipment and the training and the resources that they need to go out there and really get the job done for people. And not just to do the job, but to do it and to leave a positive impression on that customer's face, right? Like, right. Man, the guys came in and they did all this work, and it's that attention to detail or that care. Like, they went in and covered up all the furniture, or they immediately started collecting pictures, or they did this extra thing to take care of my pet, or like those small acts that when somebody's at their absolute worst, when they've had the worst day of their life, that they can go in there and do something small for them in their time of need, that those small acts not only represent them as individuals or the city or the fire department, but the fire service as a whole.
Yeah.
Like, it's a powerful, powerful thing. I get an immense amount of satisfaction out of watching really small decisions that we make administratively pay off on the fire grounds.
Yeah.
It's
It,
awesome.
so it's really cool because when I think about the role of a fire chief, and you're articulating it very well, which is this idea of understanding the 60,000 foot view and saying, and then what are all the levers you can pull to make the mission successful? And it's
Yep.
super complex, but there's so many different things, little nuances and things that you can engage with to create the outcome, the aggregate outcome. And to me, that's it's as I've grown up in the organization and gained a little bit of elevation and perspective, learn to appreciate and learn to realize that your ability as a fire chief to serve the community is vicariously through the troops, right? And your job is to support them in the mission, give them the tools, the training, and the supervision and provisions of policy to help them be successful.
That's it.
And that's what a really neat. It's just a great perspective. I love it.
It's awesome. So we sat down as an organization a few years ago, and I had been meaning to do it and putting it off for a while. I was like, no, you know what? Like I just kind of came in one day on the fly. I didn't even plan on doing it. And I just pulled everybody into a room and I said, hey, our mission statement stinks. It's awful. I hate it. I go, and you guys I know you don't know it, and that's okay. I go, I really want to simplify it, and I want something that really, truly, like, defines who we are and why we're here. You know what I mean? So what's our job? Like, what is it that we're here to do? And I did the same exact meeting with every shift and got everybody involved in the process. And then I was like, talk to me about your core values. Like, what's important to you? What are our values as an organization? So it's an exercise that everybody does.
Yes.
Or most departments do, right? But man, out of that came the coolest mission statement ever. In Carlos's humble opinion.
Okay. Now you got to say it. You got to tell us what it is.
All right. So everything is our job and every encounter matters. That at no point should you pass something that needs to be done that you see done and think to yourself, oh, that's not my job.
Right.
Everything, you are a public servant, that everything is your job. And that embodies what the fire service is. We are the community's problem solvers, that over the course of the fire service's career, every time a new and complex, threat emerges on the populace and nobody knows who to hand that problem to, the fire service has always been the one to stand up and say, send me. Right? I will do that. That's how we got into hazmat. We're doing it now with Asher events. Like, the mission continues to grow and creep in a way where when people don't know who to call for an issue, they call us. Miami-Dade has a darn snake team. Like, that's a threat down in Miami. Like, they have an entire team of people within fire rescue devoted to snakes, anything that crawls, snakes, crocs, all that stuff. They have like a venom team. Like, that's because that's an emerging threat down in South Florida, invasive species and all of these things. It's like, who could have seen that? Write that into an IFSTA book.
Right.
But they've developed a whole team out of it.
Right.
And it's like, it's not even enough that they did it. They're like super proud of it and they love it and they're really, really good at it.
Right.
So it's like, it's amazing. So yeah, everything is our job, and every encounter matters. I'm a massive proponent of stewardship.
Yeah.
And I tell people that all the time. Like, you don't understand, like, being in the fire service is a privilege. It truly is. It's not a right. You get the opportunity to be in this time-honored profession. And the only reason that you get to do it is because somebody before you didn't let it fail. Somebody before you fought to keep what job you're in right now, or somebody before you fought to expand the department so that you had the opportunity to do this for a living.
Right.
And so in our organization, we were an organization when I told you, when we got hired because a whole shift of folks left. Right. And so there were talks of us consolidating and merging into another agency. And like, we've been around since like the mid 1800s. The nation's oldest city.
Right.
And I tell people that the only reason that we have a fire department today is because people fought to keep it years ago, right? That while you're here, your job is to be a steward of it. It's your department right now. You drive it the way that you think it needs to be driven. Leave it in the best possible shape that you can, because inevitably you got to hand it off to somebody else.
Right.
The journey's going to end. But for the time that you have it, for the time that you own it, you take care of it, honor it, respect it, and leave it better than you found it.
I love that. Here's a question that is in my mind that I want to push back a little bit on. When we talk about everything, and this is, to your guys' mission, everything is our job.
Right.
The crux of that for me, or the struggle I have with that, is there's a mandate from the community, and the question is
Mm-hmm.
at what point are we are all things to all people, and 911 becomes, we become handyman in the middle of the night as well, right? And you
Yep.
see this occasionally, and so where does customer service and the ability to provide emergency service, there's a breakover point where we're not providing our primary mission, right? Or we're straining the system so hard. So I guess I have an answer to my own question, I guess, which is we have to be able to support that mandate.
We do.
So if the community wants to call us to change batteries in a smoke detector in the middle of the night, okay, but we have to have the capacity in the system to properly do that without breaking the system and not being able to fulfill our primary mission and be available.
I know. I agree with that, right?
Yeah.
But that goes back to that desire to want them to be happy, fulfilled, and not, like our job shouldn't be to beat them into the ground. And I think what becomes really difficult, and we're seeing that now more than ever, is there are so many challenges hitting the fire service at the same exact time that, there is an onus of, hey, maybe we need to throttle back on some of these, non-emergency calls. If it's coming at the cost of your membership, by all means. But that's where we need to be communicating those needs to folks.
Right.
Right. And the hope is that, are you capitalizing on those good deeds or good acts? Right. So I remember after one of the storms that we had, I've got the entire department rallied around us. And I told them, I said, listen, because it was fairly, we had a good lull period. We did all the preparatory stuff. We did a bunch of work during response. And then we were just resting and waiting for daylight, because that's when we knew we were going to go out there and hit it. And I remember telling them, I said, listen, all right, so this is where you earn your keep. Okay. It should be a competition of who comes back here with the most positive feedback from residents. Like, if you see some, I want you out. I want you in the streets, windows down. If you see somebody that needs help with something, just stop. I don't need you out there for 12 hours. I want you to be visible. And if you see somebody in need, get out of your trucks, help them do something. This is where you earn your keep. This is where you are allowed to make a massive investment in the organization's credibility savings account, right? Because the deposits that you make into that credibility savings account today, we're going to cash in the future, right? If we have to go before the commission or council and say, look, I need 12 more firefighters to open a new station, right? We want the public's reaction to that to be, if the 12 firefighters that they're going to hire are like the guys that got out and helped me when I needed help with this, then yes, absolutely. Right. I want 12 more of those guys and gals out in the streets of St. Augustine.
Right.
So I think that is a part of it, that somewhere along the line, we get so busy that we stop sharing these small acts that truly set agencies apart from other people. There are so many amazing things being done on a daily basis, and so many extra things that I think guys and gals do when somebody needs help that, for the most part, the public never knows about. That sharing those stories, it lends itself to credibility, but managing that scope of work in today's fire service is paramount. I do agree with you on that.
Yeah. And it's a tricky balance, because you've got to be a good steward of the community's
Yep.
fiscal piece, right? But at the same time, we have to provide the right level of support, right? Which
Yep.
requires hiring people and providing apparatus and fire stations, et cetera. And,
That's right.
and if you don't have good, positive political capital, then you're
Hmm.
not going to get the support you need, and it's going to be a death spiral, right? I'm being,
Right.
melodramatic, but it becomes very difficult to provide that, provide your primary mission, let alone be able to even provide quality customer service. It just becomes an
It
insidious
does. It
cancer.
does. I mean, and then sometimes, look,
Mm-hmm.
agencies will suffer from credibility injuries,
Right, right.
right?
Yep.
So the same way that one good act makes everybody look good, one bad act makes the entire organization look bad.
Yeah. Well, and frankly,
And
it'll dot the I of the entire fire service
yeah,
because
100%.
it's not local. We all hear about it.
Hmm.
So we're talking about political capital, and then we talk about like in our own agencies, and I want to pivot just a tiny bit and talk about some of the stuff that you're doing in the Florida Fire Chiefs Association, and how you guys are kind of reaching out a little broadly at some kind of topics that are affecting the entire fire service, right? And one of the things that you and I touched on was sort of the younger generation. I'm throwing up air quotes over here that you can't see, but the younger
Yeah.
generation and what that looks like, and what their needs are, and how you guys are addressing that. I really love what you guys are starting to do, and the data
Yeah.
collection you're doing.
They're the future of the fire service. So somewhere someone's rolling their eyes going, no, they're not. But yeah, yes, they are. They are the future of the fire service. Love it or hate it. They absolutely are. And I am trying to tell people to embrace the change. I think it's needed. And my hope is that the fire service is better for it. So yes, I'm a board member for the Florida Fire Chiefs Association. And then I chair the Florida Firefighters and the Standards and Employment Council through the division of the State Fire Marshal's Office. I've been on the council for a couple of years. Last year, I was asked to chair it, and one of the things that we continue to hear from chiefs all across the state is, "Hey, is somebody going to do something about retention or recruitment? I can't find people." Or and it really started in more rural parts of the state and has really spread like wildfire. South Florida is very different. The state's very diverse. If you've been to Florida, I mean, you've got the Panhandle is for the most part very rural, unless you're in Tallahassee or along the coast. Northeast Florida, has one large metro and then a couple of suburban communities, but it's fairly rural inland. Then you got a ton of density along I-4, and then south of I-4, it is what we say resource rich, with the exception of the very center of the state. So we really embarked on this. We were hearing it from everywhere except the South Florida departments. They're like, no, we're not seeing an issue with recruitment or retention. We've got tons of folks. That monster is starting to kind of show itself down there now. It's like now we're a little bit over a year and a half into this. And so what we did is, in conjunction with the Florida Fire Chiefs Association and the Bureau of Fire Standards and Training, we held a workforce caucus at the State Fire College in Ocala, Florida, and invited a handful of departments. What we did is we worked to make sure that we got them regionally. So I got a couple from the Southwest, a couple from the Southeast. I got a few from the central part of the state, a couple from the Northeast where we are, and then some folks out from the Panhandle. And we said, we want you to send us junior firefighters. We specifically want to target firefighters under 5 years of service, because this is the demographic that we want to target. This is, I mean, for the most part, most of them Gen Z, right? This is the future of the workforce. And we wanted to identify what is working. What are the problems with recruitment? And what are some of the potential solutions? And then what are the problems with retention? And what are some of those potential solutions? Can we get a list of best practices, things that work, things that don't work? What are the barriers preventing people from, what are the barriers preventing more people from wanting to get into this?
Right.
And then we started a draft of a white paper. We wanted to do a second caucus later that year, and we did, with a larger sample size. which is where I met Lindsay. We now have a mutual friend.
Yes.
Yeah. And
what up, Lindsay? I know you're listening.
Yep. Yeah, she's amazing. Just absolutely amazing.
I totally agree.
Yeah, so the information that we got out of it was amazing. And, the nerd in me, because I like data, I've like done a whole deep dive into demography and demographics and what does the future of the workforce look like. So, but there was a lot that we got out of that. We have yet to find anybody that felt like a hiring bonus was an attractant to the job.
Yeah.
But
so
then
it's not
departments
just
everywhere,
about money.
It's not just about money. Money's important.
Yep.
Right? To all my locals out there.
Yep, totally. I mean, it is for sure.
It is. It's a part of the benefits package. It does. I'm not at all suggesting that it should be ignored, right? Because we want them to be fulfilled while they're working with us. So it is a very important part of the process. But that in terms of attracting them to the job, if the difference was this department has a hiring bonus and this one doesn't, it didn't really seem to make a difference with the folks that we caucused or spoke with. That we talked a lot about the entry barriers, things like needing to pay your way through school, and we're seeing more and more departments now in the state sort of backing off of that mandate and beginning to budget money to send people to school in order to reduce one of those barriers. A lot of them talked about firehouse culture and it being a very intimidating environment for them. But overwhelmingly, the work-life balance was a big, big deal. All right. The memes of Mando and mandatory overtimes are a real concern. But then there were other things that were really eye-opening to us that continued to come up. The lack of feeling valued or involved within the organization was a big deal.
Yes.
Right. Like, so they're like, no, like we feel like we're doing all of these good things, but like no one's telling anybody.
Right.
We feel like a person. We don't feel like we're a valued member of the team. And that's where I think a lot of this has to do just with demographics and a changing or shifting population of the fire service. So the work-life balance is they value that maybe more so than they do, the total compensation package.
Right.
So they're okay. It's not that they're not willing to work. And I don't like that stereotype from people. It really and truly, I believe that they are willing to work and that there's a drive for them to want to do this. But there's just a ceiling, there's a cap to what they're willing to go through.
Right.
And we've got to be understanding of that. The retention, I will tell you right now, anybody listening, I don't care what department you are with, if you are having a retention problem, I encourage you to really look inward at your own organization. That retention is everyone's responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay. If you are up there upset at a union meeting saying, what is my chief doing for retention? What are you doing for retention? We love to use data and analytics in the fire service to tell us where a new fire station should go, or, do we need to add a rescue unit in this zone? Take that same energy and focus it inward, right? Do an internal audit of your own organization and say, is there a specific station or a specific company officer that just seems to be burning through people? Or is there a battalion that seems to have a way better retention rate than others? There is probably something working really well in that battalion or in that station or in that firehouse that we as leaders should be looking at and saying, hey, but we're not doing that internal audit, right? We just need to put a butt in a seat. It seems to be the model of everybody. And I understand that. Like, I will 100% sympathize with chiefs in that regard. Right. So, but here's the trickle down effect. So here's the evolution of bad morale in a department. People are tired of being mandatory for overtime. Chiefs post and try to hire somebody. Maybe there aren't a ton of great applicants. So the options are, I hire this person and fill the gap so that I don't have to mandatory people, or I sit back and wait for the right person to come through the door. And more often than not, they're just choosing to hire those people that come through the door.
Mm.
So then the perception on the street becomes, man, we've really lowered our hiring standards, or we'll hire anybody. But they have to understand that it's just this vicious cycle. The applicant pool out there right now doesn't exist. And so that is where this caucus or workforce study really led us to do a statewide survey. We're like, everybody says it's bad, but like, how bad is it?
Right.
Nobody had compiled the data yet. So we sent a survey out to departments all across the state, had just over half of them respond, which was good because of the half that responded, we think we captured, 3/4 of the paid professional departments within the state. We don't have a ton of volunteers. And so what it told us is there's about 1,500 vacancies statewide right now in open firefighter positions. And then we looked further and said, well, how many folks do you have in the drop plan that are getting ready to go? That number was at about 2,500.
Wow.
Right. So I'm like, well, shoot, that's 4,000 firefighters right there. It's like, hey, so just out of curiosity, because Florida's booming, we had a ton of people move here over the last 3 to 5 years. What are your future expansion needs? Like, how many stations do you plan to open? What do you need in the next 5 years? And that number came in at around 4,000. So all of a sudden now we're zooming out going, hold on a second. Like, we need 6,000 firefighters, and, we've got 1,500 vacancies right now. Well, we're only certifying right at about 2,000, 2,300 a year. And some of those just aren't hireable. They wouldn't pass a background, or,
right.
For one reason or another, they're just, they're not going to be employable within the system. So it's not really 2,400. It's a little bit closer to 2,000 or 1,800. And so what my suspicions are, and where we've kind of landed on this, is that it's possible, if not probable, that the problems are really likely to persist and get worse over the next few years. Federally, the unemployment level remains relatively low. And so that's what led me to look at demography and demographics. So like, I want to know more about Gen Z, because Gen Z is the future of the workforce, right?
Yep.
Gen Zs, they're, right now about 11 to 25 or 26, depending on what chart you look at. So your 18 to 25-year-olds, like, these should be our target demographic. These should be the people we're targeting for a career in the fire service. What makes Gen Z tick, right? Because this is the generation that's under assault by the fire service. This is what everybody says.
Right.
These guys don't want to work. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. They're more than willing to do it. But there are some, characteristics that did really stand out to us. So I'm a big, data nerd, like I said. So Gen Z are Gen Xers kids. Okay. So your Gen Xers, 34 to, or what is it? I don't know, it's about 34, 44 to like 58, like around in that age group right now. So Gen X is one of the smallest generations we've had in the last 100 years. They're just not a large generation. The millennials are baby boomers kids. And millennials are the largest generation we have had since the baby boomers. But millennials are in that 27 to 40 or 42 range, somewhere in there. So they're a large demographic, but Gen Z is relatively smaller. So small generation breeds a small generation.
Right.
We also have seen a 20% drop in the birth rate in this country since 2006. Right? So 1 in 5 kids, or 1 in 5 families isn't having kids compared to the same exact time frame. So what that's telling me is, like, there's less of these young people to go around.
Right.
That the workforce pool isn't going to be large and robust the way that we think it's going to be. We've enjoyed boomers in the workforce, which were a very large demographic, and now millennials in the workforce, which is a large demographic. And so the workforce is slightly shrinking. It's going to be fine in the long run, because millennials were a large generation. They should have more kids, but we're a ways off from that, conceivably like 10 to 12 years away from that. Like, who's going to wait for that? And so for me, retention really becomes the name of the game, keeping
Right.
people satisfied and fulfilled at work. So, there's a study that was done by McKinsey and Company, a research firm, and so they said that 51% of Gen Z workers prefer independent work in their career fields.
Mm.
Right. So this is the generation truly that grew up with tablets and smartphones their entire existence.
Right.
They are very comfortable coding or in an office that doesn't require a tremendous amount of interpersonal interaction or communication. And I know that folks in the firehouse see that today.
Right.
Like they're not coming in the door with the interpersonal communication skill set, and the fire service culture or a firehouse culture may be a very intimidating place for them, depending on the individual. So they're not likely to feel like they can be their true selves in the fire service. They're also the Y generation, right? Not the letter Y, but like WHY, Y. They need that why. They want to know why you do things the way that you do it. Why is it important? Why do I need to learn this? And my generation was never brought up to question the why, right? So that's the Army in me. Hey, you go stand in that. Hey, here's a rifle. Okay, you go over that hill. You kill anybody that doesn't look like you. Okay. Nobody ever thought to ask why.
Well, if you did, you'd be told to shut your mouth.
Yes, sir, or yes, sergeant, and you go charge that hill. But today they need that, and so their entire lives they've had their devices in their hands. If they had a question to anything, they could Google it. Right. So they got the why, and that's a part of what makes them tick. And so where I relate that back to the fire service is there's a lot of us that are ingrained into doing things the way that we have done them, right? So the fire service has grown immensely in the last 40 years, and the mission has grown kind of back to where we were talking about at the start of this.
Right.
But has management grown? Right? Are we leading the same way we were leading 20 years ago? And my perception is, for the most part, yes. And we need to get back to cultivating cultures of mentorship.
Yeah.
And we need company officers to be company officers. We need them to be teachers and mentors, and they have to cultivate a culture and climate where it's okay to ask questions and encourage that, and don't belittle people. And that doesn't mean that the fire service is getting soft. Like, I get that. At the end of the day, you want your firefighters to be tactically and technically proficient.
Right.
You can do that. They can be that person. You can develop them into phenomenal, aggressive firefighters. It's just about the path that you take to get there. That's what I believe needs to be changed. This generation needs it more than any other. And then people say, well, they don't want to work. No, they respect a work-life balance. And then what do we tell them when they come into the door? Like, you got to take care of yourself. You got to have a good work-life balance. And then we're upset when we run them into the ground and they want to go.
Right.
So, because we mandatory them. So retention to me really becomes important.
So you bring up a really good point. The two pieces I want to touch on. And one is this idea of work-life balance, right? We, in our recruiting, at least this has been my experience, and I imagine you'll echo this, part of the pitch has been work 10 days a month and have all this time off and be able to spend time with your family. And we expect you to be physically fit and eat healthy and live a good, live a balanced life. And yet then, and now, we is a bait and switch. So now we're saying, and you're gonna get a kick doors and fight a lot of fire and run a little bit of EMS.
You're at your third nursing home call.
Right. Yeah. And you're like, this is total bullshit. This is not the job you told me it was going to be. And so we talk about retention. Folks are like, this is not the job you promised, and I'm not getting to do the work I dreamed of. And then the other piece you mentioned, which I think is really important too, is this idea that this next generation isn't what we were. And I have a problem with that, because who's responsible for helping those folks develop into the firefighters that we want them to be? It's our job.
We are.
Right? It's the company officer's job. It's my job. It's your job. And that for us to sit here and just be mad at them is ridiculous, because they're a product of our world that we all live in and benefit from. And so, I was talking to a friend the other day who was telling me about a firefighter who didn't know how to flood start a saw. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't know how to flood start a saw until I was taught how to do it. And that comes at a different point in our lives. And, and
Yes.
I will say, I worked construction a little bit after I got out of the Marine Corps before I came on the fire service. I swung a hammer. I didn't do anything with saws. So I didn't know how to flood start a saw. I'd never had that opportunity. So yeah, did I come with a construction background? A tiny bit, right? But I came with a military background, so I guess that was my one advantage. But it is our obligation to lead these men and women where we need them to be, and to get them to develop their KSAs, right, their knowledge, skills, and abilities to the right level. The last thing I wanted to ask is, before I forget, is there a place where we can share an address where someone can see that research and read it and or maybe replicate it?
So I don't have it readily available, like a website or anything. So we're drafting a white paper now.
Oh, okay.
It's just about done, where we're putting this information in there as a part of it. We intend on actually presenting at the Florida Fire Chiefs Executive Development Conference, which will be in July in Naples, Florida this year. And either right before that or at that time, we will basically publicize the paper and make it readily available to folks. So
very cool. I
yeah.
believe that everybody is experiencing the same dilemma and having the same conversations and asking the same questions. So I see a lot of value in sharing that information.
I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. So every problem should present itself as a potential opportunity for something. And I think that it's here, right? Look inward for the solutions too. Like if you're having a hard time with recruitment, and you're advertising on Facebook, like you're way behind. Like there's no way a new applicant's going to see, you know what I mean? Like it's that applicant's parents or grandparents, like, hey,
they're not on Facebook
you should
anymore.
look what I found. Like, please apply. Like, right. But I bet that you've got a handful of rookie firefighters that are very proficient at TikTok.
Right.
Right. Bring those folks into the fold. Hey, you want to be a part of something really cool? I'm going to develop a marketing team within the organization. Give them guidelines, give them guide rails, right? Like,
yeah.
Hey, you're okay to operate in this space, right? Not carte blanche, like free, but man, I guarantee you there are people or organizations struggling to find people, and the ones that you need to recruit them are already in-house.
Yeah.
Just as a solution. Listen to their input. It's a different time, but like it or not, this is the future of the workforce. If you're waiting around for this next generation of folks that aren't going to ask why and are going to be less sensitive, like it's never going to happen. You're going to find yourself going out of business or perpetually mandatorying everybody. Right. But look at it. So, at the beginning, like, I don't know, however long ago it was, 40 minutes ago, because we've been talking for a while now. But like I talked about the ability to zoom out.
Yep.
And watch how one small decision affects everything else. So cultivate a climate of mentorship. Cultivate a climate where it's okay to ask questions. And then it's going to be somewhere where people want to be, and they're going to feel comfortable, and they're going to feel fulfilled. And then they're less likely to leave. And what are they going to do? How many people do you know that are in the fire service or got into the fire service because their buddy told them, get into the fire service, it's awesome, it's the best job ever? Right? Tons. And guess what? They're just not saying that now because it's not a comfortable environment for them.
Right.
But if you cultivate these climates, if you can change things, right? Get off of the freaking Target solutions and go out into the bay or out into the parking lot and pull stuff off of trucks. Put your company officers out in front of people again. Cultivate that climate where it's okay to ask questions, that you're not going to get belittled, you're not going to get berated for. Teach people to do your job so that they're ready to step up to the next level. People will want to be at those departments. People will leave bad departments to want to go to those departments. You won't have the turnover. they will find friends and tell them you need to come work for the fire department. It's awesome. I've learned so much. I get to do so much great stuff. And I've learned a lot since I've been there. You can cultivate those climates. Now, all of a sudden, the mandatory things stop, right? We can start to plug some of these gaps. We can patch the holes where we're losing people left and right, and really work on retaining workforce and invest in them. And it's a heavy, heavy lift by no stretch of the imagination. Am I sitting here thinking you're going to wave a magic wand and that this is going to be over tomorrow? Okay. Now, the only other alternative, if you want the bright side, is you've got to hope for federal unemployment to go up to 8-9%, tons of people to be laid off, okay, and then for really talented people to flock into the fire service for safe and stable employment.
Yeah.
But, what was the New York, the training chief, Lee?
Oh, Lieb.
You had on not long.
Yeah. Frank Lieb.
Right. Like hope is not a strategy.
Right.
Or luck is not a strategy.
Luck is not a strategy.
Like if you're gonna, luck is not a strategy. If you just want to sit back and do nothing and hope, and that you're going to get lucky and tons of people are going to enter the workforce in the future. Hey, go for it. Good luck. And in the meantime, I'd be more than happy to send my application to your firefighters. Right. Because we will commit to doing it. We will commit to doing it differently.
Yeah.
I'm the city of St. Augustine. I think our next 4 fire chiefs are already in the building. I stand by that. We are committed to succession planning, to developing future leaders. And there are people that you hire on day one thinking to yourself, man, like that guy could be a fire chief, or that girl could be a fire chief in 15, 20 years. Right? Well, like we're going to invest in them now, train them well enough to where they could go out anywhere that they want to go and be ultra successful.
Well, the word you used was invest. And I absolutely believe in that. You've got to invest in your people. And I will say this, at every level of the organization, if you're a backseat firefighter and you have a booter sitting next to you, invest in that booter. If you're a captain, invest in your crew. If you're a battalion chief, on down the line. And, that is so important. It's absolutely critical. You train them as if they're going to stay. Because if the other option is you train them and they leave. Okay.
Right.
Well, or you don't.
So train them well enough. Right?
Or you don't train them and they stay.
And
And that is not good for your organization.
It's terrible, right? So
it's not healthy.
I love that. I've heard that. I used that when we did a presentation not long ago, right? And so it's but there was another one I saw recently where it's like, well, look, train them well enough to where they could go out and be successful. Okay. Treat them well enough to where they reward that with loyalty and they never want to leave.
I love it.
Right. Embrace that. Make the company officers leaders again. Cultivate that climate, and the fire service is going to be fine. Right. I told somebody like not long ago, I want a fire service that I want my son or daughter to join. Yeah. If we can leave it, it's on us. This is the challenge that we have been presented. This is our generation's challenge. Okay. Return the fire service to what it used to be, make it better, right? Envision a fire department that you want your son or daughter in 10 to 15 years. And what type of climate or culture would you want them to step into? And if everyone starts to row that boat in the same direction, the fire service is going to be fine. We're going to be great. We've never not been fine.
Love it.
Well, how long you been on now?
25 years.
25, man, God bless you. That's awesome. I love that. 25 years ago, though, somebody said, if this guy's the future of the fire service, we're all doomed. Because I know they said it about me. And here we are. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, let me ask you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
To pull us to a close. What is one horrible recommendation you've been given? Or bad piece of advice?
God, I have 2.
Okay.
I have 2, right? Okay, so one would be suck it up. Terrible advice. But the second is happy wife, happy life. I think that's terrible advice.
You're gonna have to unpack that one.
Yeah. Marriage is a partnership. It's not about one person sacrificing everything. You are an equal partner in that marriage. your happiness in that relationship is just as important as hers. If you strive to only make her happy, you will be miserable. Terrible advice.
Amen, brother. All right. What's the, give me the converse. What is a good piece of advice you've been given?
A broken crayon can still color.
That one actually, yeah, I'm going to let that go because I love that. It makes me choke up a little bit.
It's awesome. I love you, Jen. I love my wife, man. She's amazing.
Good. Jen, thank you for that advice. I think it, man, that just resonates really deep for me. And I think clearly for you, Carlos, and for everybody else, that's really important advice.
Yep. Man, I want to end just real quick. I mean, to anybody out there that has ever believed in me or not given up on me, thank you. And I mean that. Like, I strive to just keep those folks satisfied and happy on a regular basis. And there's been plenty of people that would have had an excuse at one point or another to give up on me. And I'm just so grateful or glad that they didn't.
Yeah, me too. All right, last question. So the name of this podcast is Fireground Fitness. So what does it mean to you to be Fireground Fit?
Be well balanced. It means that you feed every one of your needs, emotionally, spiritually, physically, that all of those things are every bit as important, that you need to be well balanced to be successful.
All right. I love it. Chief, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and willing to share your story and share your thoughts and ideas. It's an amazing story. And
I really appreciate the opportunity. I got a little bit more raw than I was anticipated doing. So hopefully nobody tuned out 10 minutes into it and thought, why is this guy on the podcast?
No.
And I hope that you got something out of it towards the end. But yeah, hey, I'm all in to make the fire service better. So I appreciate, Rain, everything that you're doing. I think the podcasts are fantastic. I think it's great that we are having these conversations and that you're able to have the reach that you have. It's great.
Oh, I appreciate your kind words, Chief. Thank you. Hey, y'all, that's all we got for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Chief Aviles, for sharing your time and your talents with us. Hey, if you are enjoying this podcast, get on over to Apple Podcasts, rate and review the podcast. Go to whatever platform it is that you enjoy most, subscribe to the podcast, and I promise you, then it will drop in the middle of the night when you least expect it. That being said, take the lessons learned today, find a way to bring them into your life, apply them in your life so that tomorrow, the day after that, and the day after that, you are healthier, more capable, more prepared for all that life throws at you. Going out there, y'all. Get some.